I'm sure this is the case for a lot of other people too, but I grew up in church. I didn't know God personally, so nothing really resonated with me. The worship music was nice and sitting next to my grandparents and stuff, but that was all I took from it. I was only going for my mom, so I didn't think I needed to take anything serious. Whenever altar calls would happen and people would go up for prayer, I never felt like I needed it. To be more precise, I didn't really know what I needed. I believed that God was real, but I didn't really think God would do something about my life as a child. I honestly thought that I was okay. As long as I try and be a good person, I should be fine. That's what I thought the expectation was as a Christian. Just be a good person and believe in God. And this was the case all the way into my teenage years too. God always felt out of reach for me, but I truly never reached for him myself, so it's not his fault. It wasn't until I was 20 years old where I really found out that God isn't that far out of reach. Randomly in 2015, my mom decided to move me and my sister to St. Robert, Missouri. My mom's reason for this was to give us more opportunity than Junction City, Kansas, which is my hometown. My hometown isn't big at all, and in retrospect, she was right. I grew up chasing a dream that I would make it in a sport of some kind, hopefully basketball or football. That's just what I viewed as success for myself, just wanting to be like the people I saw on TV. If we didn't move to St. Robert, I don't think I would have went down the path that I chose. To recap these 3 years, my mom kept us in church and I stayed unengaged. I tried out for basketball a couple of times and that didn't work out. I got a girlfriend through one of these churches we were going to, and that became my idol very quickly. I ran track and field knowing I wouldn't pursue it after I graduated, so I did it to just compete and have a good time. The most significant part was taking a culinary class at the Waynesville Career Center next door to the high school. This class is how I ended up going to Sullivan for chef school in Louisville, Kentucky. I've loved to cook since I was a kid, but I didn't think that could be a career for myself. I wanted to be an athlete and I wanted to make it in sports. That's why I seen it as success. And this is why I say my mom was right about more opportunity, because I don't think moving here I would have found out this was my true passion. I graduated May 2018 and I left for culinary school September of 2018. And that was my last time going to church for about 3 years. By the time late fall hit that same year, I was somebody I didn't even recognize. It was up to me to set boundaries for myself and tell myself no, and I wasn't good at that, honestly. It started off when I was asked if I wanted to smoke weed with a couple of friends that I just made. Since I'm trying to keep this cool guy facade alive, I say yes. Long story short, once I got high, I had a panic attack and I ended up vomiting all the food I had in the dorm parking lot. It was pretty embarrassing. I should have taken that as a sign to stop, but now I felt I needed to redeem myself. This situation made me pretty insecure, so I chose to pride myself on being able to smoke the most of those weed around and keeping my composure. Weed ended up consuming me, and it became my crutch. I didn't want to do anything without it. I didn't want to eat, play video games, socialize, even leave my dorm room. And once I bought a dab pen, that made all this a lot easier. I wanted to be high more than I wanted to be sober at this point. In the middle of 2019, the relationship that I had from high school that lasted for about 3 years ended. This breakup, though, was like the catalyst that drove me into sexual sin. I was holding out on losing my virginity with her, but it never happened, which I'm grateful for, because with what I know now, I know exactly how it would have affected me. And once that was over for me, I felt I had no reason to deny myself of it now. I grew up believing that losing my virginity was the pinnacle of man. That's what I was taught through society, through pornography, through friends, older male influences. Soon after, I walked right into fornication. I was persuaded that committing this sin was a goal that I should be striving to achieve, and I did it. I had no idea of the consequences that would come with it. I felt exposed, ashamed, vulnerable, and not in a good way. The depression got worse, and the weed addiction got worse. I wanted a way out of my problems, and I didn't know where to go. I wanted a solution. I thought psychedelics could do it. I was at a point where my tolerance was really high towards weed, and I wanted something stronger. So I met up with a friend of mine who had shrooms, and I took some. It wasn't a large dose, and I thought something would happen, but nothing really happened. I kept seeing online that something supernatural would happen, like I would leave my body, but I just kind of talked a lot. I don't really recall seeing anything crazy. So then I started doing some research on stronger things like ayahuasca and DMT and LSD. This was the door that led me down New Age spirituality. While researching psychedelics, I ended up seeing content about meditating, astral projection, sun gazing, raising your vibration or frequency, things like that. I got hooked onto this stuff. I thought I found something special, and to be honest, I was getting some results, I was eating healthier. I was pretty much a vegan for a couple of months. I was spending more time outdoors. I was leaving the matrix, quote unquote. I wasn't playing much music. I wasn't watching much TV. I even quit porn and masturbation for the sake of saving my energy. Whatever made me feel lower down, I gave up. Essentially, that's the doctrine behind this New Age philosophy. It's just misplaced faith. Do what makes you feel good, because the higher you raise your vibration, the closer you are to your higher self, which is supposed to be God. Apparently, God is a consciousness we should all be trying to reach, and the world trying to distract you from reaching it. And these distractions that they claim that we have is the food we eat from fast food restaurants, the chemicals and things that we use on a daily basis, the news, the media industry, the entertainment industry. All these things are all meant to keep you from reaching your higher self or whatever. Also, religion. Religion is completely shunned upon in this belief system. Once COVID hit in 2020, I had to go back to Waynesville, Missouri because the dorms were closed because of the mandate. This is when I started to watch a bunch of spiritual content creators. And one of them said that if you want to experience something spiritual off of weed, when you smoke again after being sober for a while, smoke as much as you can, as fast as you can. So when I got back to Louisville, that's exactly what I did. I'd go over to my friend's apartment who I would smoke with sometimes, and she had a roommate who was one of the only Christians I met after leaving home for college. She was actively trying to live out purity and holiness, and that wasn't something that I was familiar with seeing frequently around my age. If someone asked me if I was a Christian, I would have said yes, but that's because I was raised to be one. My life wasn't really showing it at all. This girl, however, was actually showing it, and I respected her for it. Prior to meeting her, she had a severe panic attack from weed too, but she promised God that if she survived, she would never go back to it. It was so severe that she thought she was going to die. So for a little over a year, she was in the same house watching us smoke and abstaining the whole time. So I'm sitting on this futon in the living room, rolling up weed into this wrap, and it's about 2 grams, which isn't really a lot, but based off me being sober for 3 weeks, I didn't think it mattered how much. So everything in the beginning was normal, same thing as it always is, but I'm still expecting something different to happen, because that's what the guy said. So I get off the couch to walk to the kitchen to pass the blunt to the other roommate, and as I walk back to the couch, everything starts to move in slow motion, and my face starts to get really hot, starting from my neck. It was a weird hot sensation, starting from my collarbone area, all the way up to my forehead. I stand still in the hallway for like 15 seconds where no one can see me, and I think to myself in my head, I don't know what this is, but I can't let them think I'm not okay. I gotta keep my composure. Once I reach the couch, I'm trying to sit as still as possible as long as I can, because when I moved last time, my body felt like it increased 10 degrees. This is when I started to question everything I was doing for the past 8 months or so. Is God even real? Is life all a simulation? Is this how I'm gonna die? And then I hear, "Hey, are you okay?" The girl I described earlier was watching me from the kitchen for a couple of seconds, sit there like a robot, trying to stay calm. So I get up gradually, trying to compose myself to help cook food we're about to eat, and say, "Yeah, I'm okay." But she looks at me intently and asked, "Are you sure?" I admitted it and said, "Honestly, I don't know." She told me, "It's okay. You're in Alice in Wonderland. Just calm down. You're gonna be fine." When she told me her story about what happened to her, she called it the same thing, as a joke though. So when she said that, I believed her because she's been through something like this before too. I let go of this facade that I've been trying to live in all this time, but she could already see through it anyway. So I head to the fryer to cook these chicken wings, and I'm staring at this grease bubbling, but all of a sudden my vision goes completely white with my eyes wide open. It felt like this happened for like 10 to 15 seconds, and my ears were starting to ring as if there was a siren going on, like a flashbang went off. At this point, I just say it out loud. Something is wrong with me, and I need to go sit down. Later that night, I get taken home, and the next day I'm contemplating whether or not I should keep smoking what I have because of what happened. I should have stopped at that moment, like last time, but I didn't want to go without it. I didn't think I could go without it, so I kept going. The next day, I only felt an increase in body temperature and a slight anxiety, and as the days went by, it never came back, and I got back comfortable right where I was again. For the next month, though, I started going even deeper into these New Age practices. I was trying to suppress what happened that night because I had no answer to what that was, and nobody online had an answer for it either. I felt that if I kept continuing what I was doing, I should be fine. I was living the same day, every day. I would wake up, walk around the pond behind my dorms and smoke, meditate or sun gaze, get some Waffle House from down the street, take a nap, wake up, do a little bit of my online classes, play my game, eat dinner, and go to sleep. Due to the isolation because of COVID, there were days where I didn't even say an audible word. After about 2 weeks since the night that I tripped out, the friend that was trying to help me texted me to catch up. We met up and hung out and discussed what happened that night, and I told her all the ways I've been trying to go closer to God since that night. And she responded saying, "I'm glad you're okay and I hear what you're saying, but where is Jesus in what you're doing? Because it sounds very deceiving." I looked at her confused and said, "Deceived by what? Why would God be upset when we worship in the sun or connecting with nature? He made it, didn't he?" She responded saying, "God wants us to worship him, not the things that he created." And I felt convicted, and I admitted that she was right in my head. If I'm saying I believe in God and I'm a Christian, but haven't even considered Jesus this entire time, what actually am I doing? Deep down, I was offended because I felt called out, and honestly, I couldn't say anything back. She had a valid point. I started to look at my life differently after that and really questioned if how I'm living is the right way and if I'm actually growing closer to God. I decided to just give up and read the book of John for myself. I knew the book was about Jesus, so I figured that was a good place to start. On this night, though, I felt very alone because it was the night before my birthday, which is May 2nd, and I was spending it by myself in my dorm room due to COVID. I read the whole book of John in one sitting, laying in my bed, in complete silence under a blanket, with an open heart, just wanting some answers. So in the first chapter of this book, in the literal beginning, John makes it very clear that Jesus isn't just a man, he's God in bodily form. The rest of the book is essentially John giving personal accounts on how Jesus showed that. He came to be a sacrifice for the sins of the whole world, and it came through the betrayal of one of his own disciples. The religious leaders of the time accused him of the sin of blasphemy because Jesus was saying that he's God, but he was also showing it in a variety of different ways. The punishment for this specific sin is death, so they wanted to kill him. You couldn't just call yourself God and get away with it. He was healing people, casting demons out of people, and doing a variety of different miracles. And people were believing he was who he said he was. So the news was spreading pretty fast, and the Pharisees, the religious leaders at the time, they didn't like that at all. So the disciple Judas became disappointed in who Jesus was because he wanted to be viewed high in the world, and Jesus came to be a lowly servant. So he sold him out for money and helped the Pharisees capture Jesus because they wanted to crucify him and make him pay for his sins, quote unquote. Jesus let himself be captured and didn't even fight it. He was beaten to death on the cross as if he was a criminal, to the point where you couldn't tell if he was a man or a woman, just completely mutilated like an animal. But the catch is, he never sinned, even though they thought he did. So death had no power over him, like death has over us. He's God. How could he die? Why would he die? And it's because he died for us. Our sin is why we will die. But Jesus never sinned, so he wasn't deserving of death in the Father's eyes, and also wasn't deserving of death to the people who were accusing him of blasphemy, but they didn't care. The Pharisees didn't have the faith to believe that Jesus was telling the truth about who he was. If they did, they'd have to admit to their hypocrisy and self-righteousness, and acknowledge that the one who's been prophesied about for thousands of years is actually in front of their face. The Pharisees were in love with the image they had from the people and the power and authority they had over people. And when Jesus came, he shifted everyone's focus onto him, not even trying to seek it out, just by doing miracles and people desiring it in their own life. And they couldn't do that themselves. They were just regular people, and they wanted him dead for it. Out of obedience to God the Father, Jesus laid his life down for us. Jesus was fully capable of not letting this happen, but he chose to let it happen. After 3 days of being dead, he came back to life. The proper price was now paid for the wage of sin over our life, which is death. The only way out of this debt we're all in is to put our faith in Jesus for the sacrifice of our sins, because nothing else can fix the mistakes we've already made before God. We've sinned once already, which makes us guilty completely. God is not cruel or condemning. He's loving, and this is how he showed us. God could have left us down here with no way out, but that isn't who he is. If we don't repent and put our faith in Jesus for the payment of our sins, we'll pay them ourselves, and that is hell. We only get this life to make that decision. So after finishing 21 chapters of this book, I laid in my bed for like 20 minutes and just thought about my life and what I've made of it, leaning on my own understanding and making my own decisions. When I was in high school, I struggled with things then, of course, but once I got to college, I picked up so many vices and I was lost. I was depressed, I was angry, ashamed, confused, addicted, a bunch of things, and I didn't have a way out. I didn't really know what to do. And I think the timing of the seed being planted in my heart was so important because I wasn't reading to question, refute, or debate what was being said in it. I was reading to believe it and accept it as true. I didn't know the story of Jesus consisted of all this, and I'd be lying if I said I understood all of it too. I didn't comprehend everything that I read, but what I did know was that the cost of my sin was too great, and I didn't want to take the chance. As a kid growing up, the uncertainty of death scared me because I thought death was pretty much like sleep, and I couldn't fathom the thought of death just being me sleep forever and never knowing I'm sleep. I couldn't accept that. What I thought death was is light work compared to what death actually is if I'm not in God's hands. Suffering forever is far worse than being asleep forever. And the Bible teaches that it's out of God's love and mercy that He came down and provided us a way out of the situation that we're all in because of our sin. And we cannot clean ourselves from this. I couldn't go back to the life that I was living after reading this. In that moment in my bed, in my mind, I surrendered and I repented. And I let go of believing that what I was doing was true and was leading me to God. It's been almost 5 years since I've smoked weed, and my addiction to it ended that very night. I didn't even want it anymore. I also didn't want to take any chances on having a crazy experience happen again, because at this point I knew if I go to it again now, this is my fault. I let go of all the spiritual practices that I built up and the habits I had. I had a crystal at the same time too, and I threw that away. I forgot to bring that up. I threw away my dab pen with a full cart of wax in there and everything. If God didn't do what He did when He did it, I know that I'd be right where I was. I know for a fact I would have gotten a hold of some much harsher psychedelics. God saved me right before I was going to get deep into these things. And if He didn't, I'm sure I'd be online to this day speaking about being woke and opening your third eye and astral projecting and all this stuff. I know I would. And I'm not even saying these things to bash the people that do it right now online, or the ones that believe it that are watching. I just want people to know the actual truth because there is one. A lot of people that we all admire on TV now believe these things and teach them. And it sounds good to the ear, but that's the thing. It doesn't address the real issue at heart, and that's our sin. This is all just another deceiving doctrine to get us to be prideful about ourselves and think we don't need God, which is the one who made us and actually knows how to fix us. The one that God used to plant the seed in my heart is currently my wife, and we've been married for almost 5 years, and we also have a 1-year-old daughter. Being a Christian doesn't necessarily mean that life's going to be easy. There's still suffering we have to endure and our flesh to deal with, but following Jesus means that we actually have the ability to overcome these things and have hope on the other side of it, because Jesus showed us that He overcame it Himself. And this is all possible by having the ability to receive the Spirit that rose Him from the dead live in us by faith, not by earning it. I hope that this video was enlightening to you in some way, and at least made you a little more curious about who God is. With that being said, my name is Kevin McGee, and thank you for watching Cooking for Christ, Episode 1.